Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Deep Dive on NewsX World. Today we're going to delve into one of the most critical and contentious elements of any lasting peace in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the proposed disarmament of Hamas. While there isn't a single document universally called the Hamas Disarmament Plan, the concept is central to the comprehensive Gaza peace plan announced in late 2025. This plan outlines a multi-phase approach, with Hamas's disarmament being a cornerstone for future stability and governance in the Gaza Strip. It's a complex issue, fraught with political, ideological and security challenges from all sides. Let's begin by breaking down what the proposed disarmament actually entails. Firstly, and most fundamentally, the plan insists upon the total disarmament and demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. This means that Hamas, along with its paramilitary wing, the Al-Qassam brigades, would be expected to surrender all weapons and cease to exist as a military force. This isn't just about small arms, it's about eliminating all offensive capabilities. Secondly, it demands the destruction of all military infrastructure. This includes the extensive and sophisticated tunnel network that Hamas has built beneath Gaza, as well as any weapons manufacturing facilities. The goal is to ensure that Hamas's military capability is not only neutralized but cannot be easily reconstructed. Thirdly, and equally vital, is the cessation of Hamas's governance role. The plan requires Hamas to relinquish all political control over Gaza, paving the way for a technocratic committee of Palestinians and international experts to assume administrative duties, supervised by Donald Trump's Board of Peace. This is not just about disarming fighters, it's about dismantling the entire political and military infrastructure of Hamas in Gaza. Now, how would such a monumental task be achieved? The plan outlines two primary mechanisms for enforcing the disarmament and managing the security transition. The first is the establishment of an International Stabilization Force, or ISF. This would be a multinational military body with a clear mandate to monitor security, oversee the demilitarization process and maintain law and order in Gaza, including facilitating humanitarian aid delivery. The vision is for this ISF to comprise peacekeepers, potentially from Muslim-majority nations operating under the supervision of that Board of Peace. However, this immediately brings up a major point of contention. Many potential contributing nations have expressed reluctance to enforce disarmament against active militant groups, preferring a traditional peacekeeping role. Hamas itself has vehemently rejected the ISF's mandate, seeing it as a direct threat to what it calls the resistance. The second mechanism concerns Israeli security latitude. Israel insists on maintaining a significant degree of military control and presence, especially in strategic areas like buffer zones and the Gaza-Egypt border, often referred to as the Philadelphia Corridor. This is to ensure that Hamas's military capabilities are permanently eliminated and cannot be rebuilt, reflecting Israel's deep security concerns regarding potential rearmament or renewed attacks. This brings us to the core of why this plan is so incredibly difficult to implement: the profound disagreements and conflicting priorities of the involved parties. Hamas's official stance is unequivocal. It rejects total, unconditional disarmament. Hamas views resistance to occupation by all means as a legitimate right and sees disarmament as institutional suicide. Publicly, it has stated its opposition to both disarmament and its removal from governance. For Hamas, its military wing is central to its identity and its perceived role in Palestinian resistance. However, there have been hints of potential compromise from within Hamas. More pragmatic voices have suggested an openness to decommissioning heavy weapons, such as rockets and long-range mortars, while retaining small arms for self-defense and agreeing to a long-term truce, perhaps 5 to 15 years. This would be a way for Hamas to save face, portraying it as a strategic repositioning rather than an outright surrender. But this conditional disarmament is a far cry from the total disarmament demanded by others. Regional mediators such as Turkey argue that expecting Hamas to disarm in the initial phase is not realistic or doable. They suggest a different sequence. First, establish a credible Palestinian civil administration and an international-backed police force, and then address disarmament. The idea is that a stable, legitimate governance structure could create the necessary conditions for Hamas to cede its military role. Finally, we have the Israeli stance. Israel's leadership has consistently campaigned on achieving total victory, which explicitly includes the complete destruction and disarmament of Hamas, whether through military means or a diplomatic agreement. They are deeply skeptical of any scenario where Hamas remains armed in any capacity and are wary of an ISF that might not rigorously enforce disarmament. For Israel, security is paramount, and any enduring peace requires Gaza to be fully demilitarized and under reliable, non-hostile control. Now, joining us for a deeper conversation is Mark Sutherland, an international affairs expert. Mark, thank you very much for joining us here on the Deep Dive. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Let's first start on this huge update today. The fact that Hamas says that it will indeed disarm and give its weapons over to a Palestinian authority if Israeli occupation comes to an end. Your thoughts on how realistic this is?
Thomas, good to be with you. I don't know how long we've got, but I sense that we don't have hours to go through this. So let's go to this. We've got to remember what happened on the 7th of October 2023. We also have to look at the Hamas Charter, where it talks about, in their eyes, they just want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Go and read the Charter. The concern, understandably, is, and I am also watching the Doha Forum, thanks to people passing on information plus looking at it. But the concern is this. The peace plan says complete disarmament of Hamas immediately. I note what you have just said, where they will hand over to the PA or hand over to another authority. But the problem is, if you do that, then that authority also then believes in, when it uses the term occupation, Israel is not in Gaza. The reason why, the IDF is in Gaza is because after the attacks on the 7th of October 2023, they withdrew from Gaza 2005. The Hamas were then voted in 2007. I'm sorry to have to go over history, but we have to bear all of this in mind. And the concern, understandably, on the Israeli side is that, oh, well, who are you then handing over to? And then the ideology will be exactly the same, but it comes back at you in maybe slightly different uniforms, slightly different weapons, but it's exactly the same. At the moment, Israel has 53% on that yellow line is in control of Gaza. You then have a terrorist organization that has been running Gaza, which, with the ideology, we look at all the attacks, having stood in the kibbutzim near Oz myself on the ground, my boots on the ground. You then have to go there and look for yourself of what has gone on, and not forget, sadly, what happened with the appalling atrocities that were carried out on that day. So no wonder where 1,200 Israeli citizens were killed and 251 hostages taken. No wonder that the Israeli government, the IDF, will then have their stance. When they say disarmament, they mean disarmament. Now, at the Doha Forum and others, and also with what Turkey is saying, that now, and we may go on to discuss this, e.g., disarmament happens before any, if it gets that far, of any other country putting troops on the ground to then see this force and then creating this governing board of governors. And at the moment, it seems that Turkey, who is the only country, which is rather interesting, we can expand that, that is then willing, that is then saying to put soldiers on the ground in Gaza. Thomas.
Yes, given the current government, of course, we have Israeli elections coming out next year. You, of course, have Bezalel Smotrich saying that Gaza is a great real estate opportunity. This is the finance minister we're talking about. He's talking about building real estate on the Gaza Strip. And now Hamas has said that they want total Israeli occupation to end, and then they will give their weapons over this Palestinian Authority. Given the current government, of course, Donald Trump has shown that he has put pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. How likely is it that we will see disarmament here, especially under the Benjamin Netanyahu government?
The issue, well, I would respectfully say that I'd also like to think that if the Benjamin Netanyahu government, if the Prime Minister Netanyahu then lost the election, that whoever came in after him would also have the Israeli defense, the defense of Israel as the number one priority. Remember that after the 6-Day War, which Israel did not start in '67, they then wanted to hand back that territory back to Egypt. Egypt then refused. We look at all the unfolding because it's then being used as a piece of land to then constantly beat Israel with. The issue is this: there was a chance, 2005, under the American administration, under the pressure from then in regard to their foreign policy, Israel withdrew. They withdrew. There were wonderful sort of businesses there in regard to exporting flowers, fruit, etc., that were there that the Gazans, people living in Gaza, could have then taken and made good use of. But unfortunately, over time, all those pipes, all that infrastructure was then either destroyed, burnt down, or turned into military use within their ideology, and then rockets then started coming over the border. This has to be always constantly borne in mind in regard to the Israeli security. When it's interesting in your opening, when you talk about the Philadelphia corridor, you talk about that border with Egypt, and we also have to remember that within the tunnel system that you also referred to, there was a tunnel that went under there where you could get two vehicles side by side driving through. At the moment, there are drones coming over from Egypt and elsewhere on the Israeli borders, bringing in weapons to terrorist groups around Israel and in Israel. This has to be number one as well. And I would say, not necessarily personalizing it to a Netanyahu government. If your country is then under attack in the way that has happened from the 7th of October, and also with all the history that's gone on pre-1948, from 1948, it's understandable that you have a mindset, and I'm sure we all would, within if this was happening to our own countries, to look at the defense of that and how that we then defend our country, considering that they withdrew, and understandably, many Israeli citizens at that time were very reluctant to do that, literally being dragged out of their houses there to come out. So it's looking at how you can then benefit that for everyone. But security, Thomas, that is the number one thing, and that is the big issue.
Yes, as you said, incredibly short time to discuss such a very complicated topic, but unfortunately, that's all we have time for this hour on this episode of Deep Dive. Stay tuned for more here on NewsX World.